Hello, my name is Michelle Sachs, and I'm the Director of Training at the Houston Area Women's Center. Today, we will be discussing Title IX as it relates to sexual harassment. What is Title IX? Title IX requires schools to respond appropriately to sexual harassment that occurs at school, school-related activities, and online. The definition, according to Section 106.30, sexual harassment includes unwelcome conduct determined by a reasonable person to be severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive that it effectively denies a person equal access to the recipient's education program or activity. This includes a single instance of sexual assault, dating violence, domestic violence, and stalking. Sexual harassment can occur between students, employees, or both, and often perpetrated by someone known to the victim, such as someone they are dating, previously dated, or can be a friend or acquaintance. Title IX is intended to create a consistent, reliable, and effective means of securing non-discrimination in schools while also protecting due process and free speech. Title IX applies to K-12 schools, college, and universities that receive federal funding. Let's look at 9 key facts about Title IX. Number 1, Title IX is a federal civil rights law that prohibits sex discrimination in education. This is tied to funding. So if a school receives federal funding, they are required to comply with Title IX regulations. Number 2, schools must provide support for students who are sexually harassed by protecting privacy and respecting their autonomy. Please note that bystanders can also file a report. Schools must have in writing and abide by a grievance process stating that the school will never use or attempt to use questions or evidence that is protected legally by privilege. This would include such conversations with counselors and or doctors. If our victim survivor chooses to share the information, they must do so with written voluntary consent. Schools are also prohibited from using prior sexual history of a complainant. Number 3, your school must have a clear, well-publicized procedures for responding to complaints of sexual harassment and violence. Number 4, your school must be proactive in ensuring that your school is a safe place for you and its employees. Number 5, your school or school district must designate at least one employee as a Title IX coordinator. Please note that school decision makers, investigators, and Title IX coordinators must receive training on issues of relevance. Number 6, regardless of the outcome of an investigation, your school may not retaliate against you for filing a complaint. Retaliation claims stand on their own, which means if a complaint turns out to not be validated, you can still file for retaliation. Number 7, your school must respond to violence that occurs off campus, including school buses and extracurricular activities, as well as any instances that occur online. When a school learns that someone has reported or is reported to be a victim of sexual harassment, the school must promptly contact the person and inform them of their right to request supportive measures, whether they choose to file a formal complaint or not. They must consider the alleged victim's wishes and offer appropriate supportive measures under the circumstances. They must also explain to the complainant that they have an option and a process for filing a formal complaint. They should also never pressure an individual into filing a formal complaint or into participating in a grievance process. They must investigate every formal complaint, and every complainant must be supported regardless if they make a formal complaint or not. And then lastly, you should not feel pressured into filing or not filing. Number 8, your school should provide age-appropriate training to students on Title IX, sexual violence, consent, and your school's reporting investigation process. Number 9, your school must provide you with accommodations you need to stay in school and should be free of charge. So gender-based violence and/or harassment. Sexual offenses do not require physical force of violence, but rather are based on lack of consent on the part of the victim. Here are a few examples. Following you around, always wanting to know where you are and who you're with, or stalking you, pressuring you to perform sexual acts, touching you sexually against your will, interfering with your birth control, verbally abusing you using anti-gay or sex-based insults, hitting, punching, kicking, slapping, or choking you, verbally or physically threatening you, attempting or forcing you to have oral, vaginal, or anal sex, sending you repeated and unwanted text, online messages, and/or phone calls, including but not limited to sexual comments, making repeated sexual comments about you to other classmates, including through Snapchat, Instagram, or other social media platforms, sharing naked photos of you with classmates without your permission. Know that if you are in a dating or in a sexual relationship with someone who does some of the above, you may be experiencing intimate partner violence, also called dating violence or domestic violence. Reporting. If you are sexually assaulted, abused, and/or harassed, and are a student at a school that receives federal funds, which includes any public elementary, middle, high school, college, and most private colleges, you have 3 legal options, of which you can choose to do 1, none, or all 3. We'll start with the first one. So Title IX procedures at your school. The first one, file a formal complaint against your perpetrator, which will trigger an investigation and potentially disciplinary action for the person who harassed, assaulted, or abused you, as well as accommodation and remedies like counseling services, academic tutoring, class changes, extensions on exams for you. Or you can ask for a particular accommodation or remedies without needing to make a formal complaint against your perpetrator. Regardless of your choice, this is an administrative process that takes place entirely within your school. It does not involve the criminal legal system. However, if you are under 18 and experience certain kinds of violence, such as rape, sexual assault, or physical abuse, school officials may be required to disclose your case to the police, which could trigger a criminal investigation, which would occur outside of your school. If you report to police, an investigator will likely meet with you. In some circumstances, law enforcement or child protective services may need to inform your parent or guardian. You can also file for a protective order, which typically prohibits the person who hurt you from contacting you or even coming into a certain distance from you. A protective order is obtained through the district attorney's office and applies in and out of school. Another option is requesting stay-away orders that provide the same protection. However, they are only valid at school. Stay-away orders can be requested through your Title IX coordinator. With assistance of an attorney and a parent or guardian, if you are under the age of 18, you may be able to file a civil lawsuit for damages against your perpetrator, although these are lengthy, expensive, and often not fruitful. supportive measures. In order for you to receive supportive measures under Title IX, you must tell your school that you have faced sex-based harassment. That's because your school is required under Title IX to give you supportive measures as long as it knows that you have faced certain types of sex-based harassment. But if you don't file a formal complaint or agree to an investigation, you have two options to tell your school about the harassment, and you can receive supportive measures no matter what option you choose. Number one, make that confidential report, or two, file a formal complaint. Your school district is required to have an adult called the Title IX coordinator, as we have mentioned previously. Their job is to help you, or to help anyone who has reported sex-based harassment. There we go. All right. If an investigation deems that your claim of sexual harassment is valid, the harasser may be removed from your school. If you take a leave of absence or go back to the same school or enroll in another school in the same district, you have the right to receive supportive measures as long as the harassment is still affecting your ability to learn or feel safe. If you transfer to or enroll in a new school in another school district, your new school is not required to provide supportive measures. But keep in mind that if you have anxiety, depression, or other mental disabilities because of the sex-based harassment that you faced, you have the right to receive accommodations at your new school, regardless of whether you receive supportive measures under Title IX. You do not have to file a police report to receive supportive measures under Title IX. Remember that Title IX is a civil rights law, not a criminal law. That means you have the right to supportive measures under this law, regardless whether you file a police report or not. If a court has issued a protective order that requires your harasser to stay away from you, your school can help make sure that your harasser follows the law. For example, your school can issue a one-way no contact order that prohibits your harasser from directly communicating with you. Your school can also keep your harasser away by removing them from your class, recess, lunch, hallway, route, or bus, and in certain instances, your school. Even if the sexual harassment does not occur in the context of an educational program, Title IX recognizes that students often experience the continuing effects of off-campus sexual violence while at school. Therefore, your school should consider the impacts of off-campus violence on your education. Accommodations your school might provide may include counseling, tutoring, and arranging off time. Remember that Title IX protects students of any age from sexual harassment, including sexual violence and sexual abuse carried out by school employees. Sexual harassment by school employees can include unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal, nonverbal, or physical conduct of a sexual nature. In some circumstances, non-sexual conduct may rise to the level of sexual harassment. For example, according to the Office of Civil Rights, a teacher repeatedly hugging or putting his or her arms around students under inappropriate circumstances could create a hostile environment. These guidelines also protect students from anyone contracted by the school to provide opportunities to students as part of a school program, such as mentors or coaches. You might or might not be protected if the harasser goes to another school. The appropriate response for your school to take will differ depending on the level of control your school has over the alleged perpetrator. For example, if you were sexually assaulted by an athlete or a band member from a visiting school, your school may not be able to discipline the perpetrator. However, your school should investigate what happened, report the incident, to the visiting school and encourage the visiting school to take further preventative action. Your school should also notify you of your or any right to file a complaint with the visiting school or local law enforcement, and may decide not to invite the visiting school back to campus. And lastly, remember that services are free of charge. Other options that you can consider are community resources, such as the Houston Area Women's Center, your friends, family, counseling, and supportive networks. Prevention. The only person responsible for violence against someone is the perpetrator. Responsibility should not be placed on survivors. Consent is not the absence of no, but the continuous presence of yes. Silence does not equate to consent. Consent can be verbal, although not in every case. Be aware of physical cues as well. Discuss and respect boundaries. Ensure your partner is comfortable. Promote social norms that protect against violence by not encouraging toxic masculinity. And lastly, model respectful behavior for others. Everyone should feel safe and supported at work and at school. Remember, I believe you. It is not your fault. You are not alone. You did not deserve what happened to you. For more information on this webinar, you can go to knowyour9.org and through the U.S. Department of Education Office for Civil Rights and at hawc.org. Thank you.